Team Litten, no regrets. As you know, I'm the kind of guy who loves Pokemon. Yeah, big revelation, I know. I mean, it's a franchise I've enjoyed since it came to North America when I was in high school. And while I'm not a full-on PokeTuber, I've done a few lists on the franchise before. Unfortunately, like nearly any other franchise, there's bound to be some darkness to balance out the light. To be fair, with the right setup, you can make use of just about any Pokemon. I mean, that's why all these epic sweep videos exist, right? But the plain and simple truth is that there are some Pokemon that are just better than others. After all, you can't have more than 800 of, well, anything, without expecting to have a few that drop some spaghetti. So I guess it falls upon me to play janitor with my 10 least favorites. Now this isn't objective by any means. That would take all sorts of algorithms and formulas, and I don't have the time to deal with that and keep my video schedule. These are just the ones that I really couldn't care less about. So how about we just get started? It's game time! Water as a whole has the highest number of Pokemon of any type, which is a double-edged sword in and of itself. After all, while there are plenty of awesome water types, there's also a good number of generally useless ones such as Basculin. Right off the bat, I'll tell you two things that can make me dislike a Pokemon: our lack of potential and useless gimmicks. Two problems that Basculin has. The biggest problem with this fish in terms of performance is that it doesn't really do anything to stand out. Its move pool is extremely average and suffers from a general lack of coverage. Its stats don't do much to help it out either, with no single stat cracking the triple digits. So, what's its thing really? Oh look, it has two different colors. That's cool, right? There's just one problem though. There's no difference in performance between the two. The only thing that this difference affects is where and how you find them. Now, color differences are nothing new. I mean, the Shellos and Gastrodon line does the same thing based on geographical location, and they're not too spectacular either. But at least that's an evolutionary line. Basculin doesn't evolve, so what you fish is what you catch. On the plus side, the Rebutaberry Bass is said to be quite tasty. I'll have to keep that in mind next time I'm looking for a fish fry. In Gen 5, Dragon types were more prominent than ever. So much so, in fact, that the new Fairy type was introduced in Gen 6 to mixed results. Sure, we got good Fairy types like Florges, Sylveon, and Klefki, and existing Pokemon like Gardevoir also benefited from the new type. But on the other hand, we also got Pokemon like Carbink. This is a Pokemon that I just can't get behind. On the one hand, it lacks many of the typical quad weaknesses of many stealth rockers, and Sturdy can help it tank hits that would normally one-shot it. Also, it packs a solid typing of Fairy Rock, and base 150 in both defensive stats. Unfortunately, that's where the advantages end, because every other stat is a flat 50 across the board. Lacking offensive power means it's going to end up mainly in a setup role. Low speed means it's going to have to survive in order to do much in the way of setup, and most importantly, its low HP somewhat cancels out those high defensive stats. It also doesn't help that its move pool doesn't do it any favors, and that the weaknesses it does have are very common. One more thing! It has a connection to the mythical Pokemon Diancie, but that connection is never shown in-game, just told through Pokédex entries and shown in a movie. Yeah, we can't exactly have a normal Pokemon evolving into a mythical, but with that missed opportunity, Carbink ends up being more rough than diamond. Gen 7 had an excellent roster of Pokemon. I've already covered my favorites from that gen, so there's a card up there in the corner if you want to check that out. But again, they can't all be winners, right? Of all the Pokemon on this list, Pyukumuku was the one I wanted to like the most. I mean, its design is absolutely adorable, and I get the concept behind it. It's a sea cucumber that expels tendrils from inside its body to ward off predators, which feeds into its signature ability, Inerts Out, which deals damage to an opponent that knocks it out equal to the HP it had. Pretty cool, right? There's just one problem though, its stats don't do much to support it. Aside from Inerts Out, the only other ways it can directly damage its opponent is via Counter and Bide. Both of these moves rely on it reflecting damage back to the opponent. The problem? Its base HP is 55. So even if it does survive long enough to deal damage using these moves, don't expect it to do much. Same goes for Inerts Out, which again deals damage equal to the HP it had, meaning you only get the best from it being one-shot, and if it was knocked out by a bulky opponent, it's essentially wasted. Even then, it feels incomplete, considering it has Counter and Bide, but not Mirror Coat or Destiny Bond. Heck, you might actually get more mileage out of its other ability unaware, because its high defenses can protect it from some prominent sweepers, if only for a while. Even with that, it is far too passive for me to get behind, and if the enemy has Taunt, then it's pretty much screwed. Sorry, but cuteness can only get you so far. Even with me. Normal flying has been a common type ever since Gen 1. The Pidgey line, the Spearow line, the Doduo line, oh, and a Duck with a Leak that's pretty much useless. The opinions of Pokemon are even more varied than the Pokemon themselves, but I doubt that there are a lot of people that will defend Farfetch'd. First off, its stats are an absolute joke. Up until Gen 7, not a single one of its stats cracked 70, and even after the buff bumped its attack up to 90, none of its other stats will do much to help it. It also doesn't help its case that its move pool is extremely lacking. It can't really do all that much beyond the standard Flying-type kit. Yeah, it has a few moves outside of the norm, but even then you're better off putting them on other Pokemon. Oh, and despite being right before Doduo and Dodrio in the Pokédex, Farfetch'd is the only normal flying in Gen 1 that doesn't evolve into or from another Pokemon. Only thing it really has going for it is its item, the Stick, which can occasionally be found on it. It boosts its crit rate by 2 stages, even guaranteeing a crit with a move that normally has a high rate such as Air Cutter or Slash. Even with that advantage, it is easily outclassed by many other Pokemon. Dodrio is a better attacker due to its better stats, Jumpluff is a better sweeper due to its higher speed and access to Sleep Powder, and Perugly is a better Defiant user since it has higher speed and strength and access to Fake Out. Farfetch'd? It's just a better meal. Sure, you could try using it on your team, but sooner or later you're gonna find a better flying type, and then boom! Back in the PC box for you, young man. You've been a bad boy. Allow me for a moment to expand on a point I made back during my Alola list about the Pikachu clones. Every generation starting with Gen 3 has had at least one, and, well, aside from a few special cases, they're nothing special. Yeah, to put it simply as possible, nearly all of them have less than impressive stats, lackluster move pools, and the distinction of looking similar to Pikachu in hopes of cashing in on the little guy's popularity. And Emolga is an especially troublesome little scamp. This little squirrely brain was a common annoyance, particularly in my playthrough of Pokemon Black. The reason for this is simple. The unholy alliance of Double Team and Static, combined with the fact that barring Elisa, pretty much every opposing trainer with an Emolga has this strategy. Imagine running into a trainer with this little pest spamming its evasion through the roof on top of leaving your own Pokemon with severely crippled speed and a lower chance of actually pulling a move. Yeah, a lot of electric types can do this, but many of said electric types have a lot of other options as well, and are a lot more usable. Not only does Emolga have a predictable and lackluster move pool, but its stats are also not very good. The only thing it really has going for it is a base speed of 103, but what's the point of being able to go first when you won't get a lot of mileage out of it? Its attacking stats are weak, and its defenses are more brittle than an old lady with calcium deficiency. Also, its typing doesn't do it a lot of favors. Yeah, the addition of the Flying type may seem like a boon since it becomes immune to the Ground-type moves it used to fear, but in its place comes 2 weaknesses, those being Rock and Ice. Throw in the fact that it can't evolve, and Emolga lands squarely on my naughty list. Speaking of which... dump a lump of coal in the Santa Bird stocking because holy crap does Delibird suck! For one thing, the Ice Flying type is not a good defensive typing, being weak to some pretty common types. But that's only scratching the surface of why this Pokemon is lame. This is one case where gameplay and story integration actually hurts the Pokemon. True, the idea of a Pokemon that brings food to help lost travelers and starving Pokemon isn't so bad, but translating that concept directly into gameplay is boggling beyond any level of comprehension. This is shown through its signature move, Present. Basically, it's a gamble. Its damage is determined randomly, and there's even a small chance that it can even heal your opponent. On the other hand, if you hit the jackpot, you can do some serious damage. Or rather, you could, if not for its dreary stat table. It has a base attack of 55, meaning even if you get the maximum damage from Present, you're still not likely to get a KO. I understand that a lot of things in Pokemon depend on random chance, but this is taking things way too far. Especially for someone like me who hates relying on luck to win. Also, considering the fact that both of its defensive stats are base 45, you'd likely only get one shot to roll the dice anyway. Unless you had some brain cells and a few good TMs on hand. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Until Gen 7, it was the only move it could learn normally, and even then it only picked up another move, that being Drill Peck, which didn't help it all that much. Its lackluster TM pool doesn't do it any favors either, being extremely limited. Oh, and did I mention that it's also a huge coward? Yeah, wild Delibird have a tendency to run away. You know what though? It's probably for the best. It's better off staying away from the battlefield and doing what it does best, delivering presents. Hey, Pokemon celebrate Christmas too, right? Okay, it's one thing to suck and not have any evolutions, but when both you and your evolutions are absolute trash, you know you have some serious issues. And that's the problem with Burmy. First off, it's a pain to catch since you can only find them by smearing honey on trees. Now, where have we seen this before? Oh yeah, Pineco. In fact, they're both bagworm bug-type Pokemon. Then there's the gimmick of its cloak. It can be either sand, leaves, or trash depending on its environment. Where have we seen this before? Oh yeah, Cast Form. Not exactly the same, but similar in concept. Of course, the cloak only becomes permanent when it evolves into Wormadam. Leaf Cloak becomes Bug Grass, Trash Cloak becomes Bug Steel, Sand Cloak becomes Bug Ground. Alright, where have we seen these before? Oh yeah, Parasect, which even as a poor Bug Grass outclasses Leaf Wormadam, Scizor, which is a far better Bug Steel, and Nincada, which has two interesting evolutions to make up for the fact that it's the only other Bug Ground. And that's only if the Burmy is female. Its male evolution, Mothim, is just a generic bug-flying moth Pokemon. Where have we seen this before? Oh yeah, plenty of Pokemon before and since. And it doesn't help that its stats and move pools for both Wormadam and Mothim are both completely horrible. 424 base stat total for a fully evolved Pokemon is just pathetic. And their move pools have a severe lack of coverage even with TMs. So what are we left with in the end? Just a gimmicky, mediocre, unoriginal, and useless maggot. Trust me, you don't want any of this. And here we have another Pokemon that's a common sight on least favorite lists. I hope you can appreciate irony because there's no love lost on Luvdisc. By all accounts, Luvdisc is an absolutely terrible Pokemon. The only stat that comes even close to the triple digits is speed, and nothing else even cracks 70. It can't attack for anything, and it cracks more easily than cheap Chinaware. On top of that, it has one of the worst move pools known to water types, making it more predictable than Geese Howard's opponents. Also, it has no evolutions despite the fact that there's a Pokemon in Gen 5 that could easily pass for one. So why would anyone want one of these? Well, in the wild, there's a 50% chance that it's going to be holding a very important item, the Heart Scale, which can be used to remember moves that they've forgotten, because the only kind of memory worse than a Pokemon is someone who's affected by Jailhouse Lock. In Gen 3, Luvdisc were the only way you could get Heart Scales, so you could catch them en masse, or bring a Pokemon with Thief and Purge to land of these things. Or you could wait a generation and get Heart Scales by other means, such as the Underground, Pickup, Rock Smash, you get the idea. Luvdisc, you had one job, and you couldn't even hold on to that for long. You know, Pokédex bills Luvdisc as a gift to loved ones. I can't really imagine giving this to a girl, though. Sounds more like a one-way ticket to the friend zone. The written language, an integral part of any society. It's useful for keeping records of our history, making guides for others, or sharing stories. You know what it's not useful for? Being the basis of a Pokemon. Granted, the idea of a Pokemon based on hieroglyphics is a pretty cool idea on paper, but to be honest, the way it was executed makes me wish it stayed on paper. From a purely objective standpoint, Unown is arguably the worst Pokemon in existence. Its molasses slow, it can't take a hit worth anything more than a pinprick, its special attack is weak, and its physical attack has been completely redundant ever since the physical special split happened in Gen 4. The reason for that is because its move pool consists of a whole one move. That move is Hidden Power, one of the least reliable attacks in the series. This is due to its type being determined by a mathematical formula dependent on your Pokemon's IVs, which are never shown exactly in-game, at least prior to Gen 7, so getting the type you want requires either luck or hacking. In fact, prior to Gen 6, its power was determined by another mathematical formula. So, what does this Pokemon have going for it? Well, the main gimmick behind Unown is the fact that they're based on the Latin alphabet, and as such have 28 different forms for letters and punctuation. So in essence, they're like the Pokemon equivalent of trading cards. That being said, wouldn't you rather have actual trading cards? And it's not like you get anything of value out of collecting all the different forms. There's no real reward for doing so. Yeah, you might get some cool items in the process, but getting them all just isn't worth the effort. That is, unless you want to spell out a message in the 6 spaces you have. I think sucker is an appropriate word here. The first Pokemon Ranger game gave us a chance to obtain the first mythical Pokemon of Gen 4, Manaphy. Manaphy, in all seriousness, is a pretty cool Pokemon. It has a cute design, has good stats and a decent move pool, and starred in a pretty decent movie, as well as having the distinction of being the first mythical Pokemon that can breed. Granted, it can only breed with a Ditto, and the result is a Pokemon called Phione. This is a big deal, you know, the first ever mythical evolutionary— Wait, Phione doesn't evolve? No, that's perfectly fine. Just one question. What's the point? Phione to me is a textbook example of running with a good idea and taking a nap at the 1-yard line. I just can't comprehend how an idea that had so much potential could have been this underwhelming. For one thing, its base stats are 80 across the board, which is not very good at all. Its move pool doesn't do much for it either, being fairly limited and lacking coverage. In fact, when you look at the differences, there's literally nothing that Phione can do that Manaphy can't do better. But this only gets worse when you think about it. What is the point of breeding in baby Pokemon? You breed Pokemon with certain moves, pass those moves onto the offspring, and potentially make an even better Pokemon once the baby reaches its final stage of evolution. So the fact that Phione not only isn't capable of evolving, but can't learn any egg moves either, kills any potential that this Pokemon could have had with extreme prejudice. That's the thing that gets me about Phione, the massive missed potential that we have here. In a sense, Phione feels incomplete. It's as though the idea was there for the evolutionary line, but by the time the higher-ups pulled the plug, the Pokemon were already designed and nobody thought to remove the baby from the code. Funny how we got a legendary evolutionary line 3 generations later with the Cosmog line. You see, that's what I had been hoping for from a mythical Pokemon that could breed. But you go through all that time, breeding the Pokemon and hatching the egg, all for a Pokemon that makes all that time feel wasted. And that's what Phione feels like to me. A waste. A waste of time, a waste of a good idea, a waste of potential, and ultimately, a waste of a Pokemon. I'm the Quarter Guy, and it's actually kind of funny when I think about it. Manaphy can breed, but Phione can't evolve. Cosmog can evolve, but Solgaleo and Lunala can't breed. Either way, the concept isn't 100% realized. The difference here is that Cosmog's true potential is revealed once it reaches its legendary evolution. That's one of the reasons why Cosmog is one of my favorites in Alola, while I don't care for Phione any more than I do for my crappy old videos. You know how secrets can eat at your psyche until they become those voices in your head that tell you to watch those super cheesy Saturday morning cartoons that you used to love as a kid, but the older you get, the more you realize that they're completely brainless and now you feel like cleaning the bathroom because it's all moldy? Yeah, that's basically me right about now. Next time, Top 10 Guilty Pleasures. It's game time!